Hi, and thanks again for being with us on this lovely Saturday morning. Well, we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship and disruption in general, but first I'd like to invite my dear panelists to say a couple of words about who they are and what they do. Houssam, I don't think you need an introduction, so I'll just skip to George.
George Carivalis. I work together with Najat and Gazelle Advisory Group. I've spent a lot of time working with entrepreneurs and founders and raising early stage and later stage capital. Working also with the venture capital and private equity community in raising institutional capital for them, helping feed the ecosystem with capital, which is important, and also very much supporting the idea of early stage capital for social impact investing.
My name is Faraz Khan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Seed Ventures. My background has been banking, and from there we went into enterprise, and now we actually have a small fund that invests in high potential, high growth startups and social enterprises. But more importantly, we invest into the entrepreneurial ecosystem by engaging stakeholders like government, private sector, development sector, media, and academia, and develop a collaborative model that can actually spur the existing ecosystem, and then replicate the same models in other countries.
Good morning. I'm Jason Purvor from Droplet Computing. I'm a high-tech startup expert. I say expert. I've probably read one more book than you, which probably means I know a little bit more. I am actually a mentor here at the Side Business School, helping startups to get going at the Entrepreneurship Centre, and I also lecture at the London Business School, French-speaking business school in Baker Street. I teach entrepreneurship, sales techniques, and also public speaking there. My background is high-tech. It's .com sort of era. I was part of the founding team of one of the fastest-growing stocks on NASDAQ, a company called Inktomy, which then was basically sort of crushed by Google. And it's companies such as Cisco Systems and US Robotics. Right now, I'm working on a venture called Droplet Computing, which will basically be changing the way in which you consume your applications on the device of your choice. I'll be talking about that this afternoon. I'll also be on a masterclass this afternoon. So if you're still here waiting, despite the bribery to keep you to the end of the session by giving a prize out at the end, you may want to join me for that, because I'll be talking a little bit about the things they don't teach you at school.
Great. Hi, my name is Rahul Shah. I'm an associate partner at McKinsey & Co. In London. In some ways, I'm kind of odd one out here. I'm not an entrepreneur. My background is in banking. I work with some of the largest banks here in London, but also increasingly in the Middle East. What I do, which is, I think, kind of touches in this space, is all my clients are really keen to engage with entrepreneurs. Certainly in the banking space, they're keen to partner with fintechs. And what I do a lot of is actually try and see, is there an opportunity to actually introduce some of my clients and find them, sort of introduce them to potential fintech startups to see if there's an opportunity there where they can actually partner and work together. So yeah, I'm very keen to contribute my thoughts here today.
Great, thanks everyone. I should say a couple of words about myself. I'm Cansu. I run Startup Bootcamp IoT in London. I work with early stage hardware companies in B2B, in industrial IoT, who are looking to disrupt particular manufacturing segments of that. And well, I'm an entrepreneur myself. I have a content business that has been generating revenue for the last 5 years on well-being. And yeah, I'm really glad to have someone with so many people with such a wide range of experience on board. And because we're to frame the conversation, actually, I would love to ask you all what really defines a disruptive business? Because this has become a buzzword. If everyone is disruptive, then is anyone really disruptive? If you could give some concrete examples in your specific fields on what you deem disruptive in the current entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Shall I start?
Yeah, sure.
So I think Mark Floorman, one of our earlier speakers, touched on it well. It's something that really irritates you in a company. And the why behind your doing something, the why behind your founding a company is really important, not just for your own effectiveness, but also to attract other stakeholders within the space that you are looking to engage. If you have a powerful sense of purpose about why you are doing something, you will then be able to attract other stakeholders in the ecosystem that you're working.
For us, I think disruption it needs to be continuous. It is not something that is going to, just stay at one space. Mark brilliantly explained away the socioeconomic and political landscape that is constantly changing. Keeping that context in mind, it is your disruption is going to, if it's not moving with the same pace, then probably it would be obsolete, and especially in this day and age. So I think a constant re-engineering of disruption is more need of the time than just disruption.
Cool. So my view on this is that I think that we need to make a distinction here between entrepreneurship and disruption. And the reason I say that is that entrepreneurship is basically taking an idea that typically with entrepreneurship, there's already a market out there that's been established. And what you're doing is you're basically looking to improve upon it. The differentiation is that when you go to disruption, this is all about changing a market. This is about changing the way that people think about the way in which they consume products or services. So disruption is a very different animal, I believe, to traditional entrepreneurship. Within entrepreneurship, you may have a disruptive idea, but disruption is a subject in its own right, I believe.
Very cool. Maybe I can just give a concrete example in the kind of business I work with in terms of what is this kind of disruptive. So, I was with a bank, and these guys are always thinking, how do we sort of improve our customer experience, for example? And what kind of strikes me working with large organizations is just this extreme difficulty in making any kind of changes. I mean, we're talking of horizons here for a couple of years to do what are seemingly very simple things, and any entrepreneur could take that opportunity, which is a gap in the marketplace. So I actually have a slightly different time span in terms of disruption, which is it isn't the next sort of $1 billion idea. It's the next sort of $5 million idea, which is where I find large organizations are sort of unable to address that quickly enough, and this really creates opportunities for kind of disruptors. I mean, the best example I have is the bank I'm working with right now. They want to do some kind of peer-to-peer lending for their clients. They think it's an interesting idea. It's kind of 2 years, and it's still on the kind of drawing board. And this is the kind of space which is, I think, kind of ripe for, if you will, disruption, where players, entrepreneurs can come in, very, very tactical, narrow slivers of the marketplace, which they can actually come and dominate, which I think is the sort of space, certainly in my business, which I find ready for disruption.
I think you raise a really interesting point, because I work with corporates to help them get into disruption, and they fund us, so they actually put their money where their mouth is. But when it comes to actually implementing the disruptive ideas that the startups they support, then it's a whole different story. It takes forever, and they're not as welcoming, I would say, in my limited experience, as they make it out to be. So I'm really keen to hear about, because I know you come from a corporate background, your take on that as well. So how can you encourage a big corporate, like a giant corporate, to actually become disruptive then?
Yeah, maybe I can just talk briefly, and I'm keen to hear some thoughts. I think one of the reasons why corporates are just not great at kind of disruptive innovation is they're the incumbents. They actually have a lot at stake in the way things are done. They're kind of taking rent off an existing ecosystem to which they are sort of, it's sort of to their disadvantage to actually be the disruptor. There's different models that are at place. I think one is, companies sort of create their own sort of startup incubator, or they kind of create like a bank within a bank, for example, which is like a disruptor. The other model, of course, is where they actually tend to partner, which is a space I find very interesting, where either they fund directly a startup, or they kind of take sort of positions, or they actually partner with disruptive players in the marketplace. I think this is the interesting area I see, which is kind of where they are looking for partners, really. But I think what's really hard is for getting these two sides connected, having a, decision making is so high up in some cases, and the scale is so small for some new disruptors. I think this is the kind of challenge we have: is how do we make them how do we align them, how do we partner with them?
So adding to what you just said, I'll give you a case and example. We work with the private sector and the corporates quite a lot. And recently we came up with a model which is called corporate impact venturing. It's not a model that we came up with alone, but there is an organization called DIVA out of Copenhagen, and they're two fantastic guys, Martin and Stefan. And they created this whole system in which they go to a particular corporate and they say, all right, you've got a supply community and you've got a distribution community. And what if together we think of a business idea, we co-invest into it, we make it profitable, and then you have the first right of refusal, your first right to purchase the stakes. We happen to be working in the same model in Pakistan with a national conglomerate. And lo and behold, we collectively came up with an idea. So Engro is the company that we work with in Pakistan, and they have got a huge supply and distribution community in dairy farming. And silage is animal feed that actually animals eat in order to actually give milk. And at this point of time, the silage packs are 60 kgs. And in Pakistan, there are three kinds of farmers. There's small farmers, medium farmers, and large-scale farmers. Small farmers are like 1 to 5 animal owners. Medium are 5 to 20, and 20 and beyond are like large ones. So 60 kg packs were only usable and efficient for the big farmers. Collectively, we came up with this idea that why not we create small silage packages for the small and medium farmers, which happens to be 80% of the total dairy farmer communities. And Engro is investing into it. Diva is putting in resources into it, and we are investing into it. So that's just a case and example through which you can actually give a value proposition to a corporate across their supply and distribution communities, and create something that is meaningful for the community and for profits as well.
So a while ago, I spent some time with a spin out from Procter and Gamble, and I think it's sort of a pressing sort of example. There was a company called HeartAge. You know what they were looking to do was to change the way in which people viewed their statistics or survivability of a heart attack. The company, as I say, spin out from Procter & Gamble, and they took a couple of very senior executives from academic and commercial backgrounds, put them into an office outside of the organisation and said, off you go and develop your concepts and idea. It became very rapidly evident to them that coming from a large institution where you have everything on tap, all the resources at your fingertips, and then suddenly having to basically become an entrepreneur is a bit of a leap, shall we say. So consequently, I got drafted in to help them to kind of put a little bit of the startup DNA into the process of it. And really, I think the thing that's required here is this ability, or there's a training I think that's required. Big business is where the majority of the revenues of tax of jobs comes from. So that's really where I think innovation could really be improved. And the idea of basically dropping a bank inside a bank is fantastic, but only if you basically get some startup DNA into the process as well, because without people being able to de-institutionalise themselves and be able to step forward into this entrepreneurship role, it's very difficult for them to take their great ideas and bring them to fruition.
So just touching on a few points here, I think the big word here is adoption. We need actually more CEOs like Houssam who get and understand that large enterprises need to engage with new technologies. And it can only come from the CEO level. A very good model or test case is Santander. run by Ana Patricia Botín. She set up a corporate venture capital fund, Santander Innoventures, headed by Mariano Belinki, who is an outstanding innovator. They are the lead collaborators with a company called Ripple, which has developed payment technologies. And they have worked very, very closely with the team in San Francisco in incrementally introducing the technology into the enterprise initially. Take it in stages and take it in steps. But it's had the full buy-in from the CEO, and in fact, Mariano Belinki is on the board of Ripple in San Francisco. But one of the most important things that Mariano would say is that the key person at Ripple is in fact a bridge builder, an individual who is not a technologist, but who can actually understand the language of technology and at the same time communicate in plain English into the corporation or the enterprise that he's working with. So I think what you're doing, what you're saying is very important. I think actually, interestingly, in the region, you have a lot more leaders at the CEO level who get this. And I think this is a huge advantage.
Great. I think all these comments also link back to what Mark very beautifully outlined and also Houssam touched upon. To be able to disrupt, you have to have a vision. You have to have a good understanding of the industries, both past and the future. And that's one thing, because I work with early stage companies, the majority of them are young entrepreneurs who have seen an opportunity and they want to go into that route, but most of the time they lack the knowledge, the know-how to actually tackle the problem because they miss the big picture at times. If corporates come in at that stage, then there's synergy, and with their know-how and the fresh eyes of the entrepreneur, then new things can actually happen. And that's one of the things, when we have a discussion around disruption and entrepreneurship, experience also comes into play. I'm keen to hear what you think. Do you really need to be an experienced, let's call it older person, to be a good entrepreneur if you want to tackle the big industries? Jason, I think you...
I'll happily sort of broach that to begin with. So, no, I don't think you do need to have necessarily experience. Because that can always be ported in. What you need is a very clear vision. I think you're really sort of touching upon that. The clarity of vision and purpose, I think that's another word that's been used a couple of times today, and I think absolutely spot on. That is really it. Why are you doing this? You know, and it needs to be beyond you as an entrepreneur, really. It needs to be what does this do for the world as well, at large. If you've got a big enough vision, then what follows from that are all the components that build a great business sort of moving forward. And a vision should be a destination that you want to hit. The path that you're going to take, or the route that you actually get to achieve that, is kind of something which is just part of the process of being an entrepreneur. You don't know where your finance is going to come from. You don't know who's going to be joining you as stakeholders. You don't quite know which direction you're going to go in. But ultimately, if you understand where you want to get to, that's absolutely critical to the success of a business. So in order to get your stakeholders on board, in order to get your CTO and your CFO on board, having a clarity of purpose is fundamental to that. Touching back on this experience thing, so a lot of startups, I think when people think of entrepreneurship, they think traditionally now it seems to be very much angled towards millennial. In the company I'm starting up, we have a 17% ratio of millennials to people who've got grey hairs. So, we have more than enough firepower and experience from sort of having done this several times. But nevertheless, the DNA that comes in from the younger generation and the freshness of ideas, the pace at which they can absorb new ideas and get them developed is breathtaking. So, what I think where we're coming to is this idea that accelerators, mentorship programs are there to basically try to help to transpose this experience and expertise and guidance to help young entrepreneurs sort of get going. So you don't need to have experience in order to become an entrepreneur, is my personal opinion. What you need, though, is to basically be able to take advice from other people and execute and act upon it.
I think a good combination it always has been, is someone who's deep into the technology, who really understands that, connected with someone who really intuitively understands how it can be applied. That combination of a founding team, whether it was Wozniak and Steve Jobs, is always very, very powerful. And that second person, the dreamer, the innovator, is often the person that can go into a large enterprise and communicate communicate that sense of purpose. Writing code, designing software requires incredible focus. You simply can't do both. So having both types of people in a startup is very important.
I think shamelessly realistic individuals who are really optimistic, and that for some odd reasons come with a new lot. And again, if you see in the past 15, 20 years, the emergence of the new economies. When I say economies, it's like the VRs, the artificial intelligence, the fintechs. These are those gaming. These are those spheres where youth and youth enterprise and youth skill set is very much advanced compared to the mid and the older generation. So, and these industries are going to reshape the old economies as well. So, I think we have all read this in Facebook somewhere or the other, that when you see people in ties, you get really impressed, but then you realize they're being run by young kids in sneakers and T-shirts. So I think the future is there.
It actually reminds me of the Dark Knight Rises, where Bane tells Batman that I was born in this, I was molded by it. So I feel for the millennial generation, which I'm technically a part of. But when I look at my cousins who are 10 years old, younger than me, I see a huge difference in the way that they use technology. So they were actually born into it, and they were molded by technology. So of course, it only makes sense that they approach it in a different way. I actually want to touch back upon your point about millennials becoming entrepreneurs, and the point of Houssam's where he talked about altruism and entrepreneurship. I think it also loops back, the conversation loops back to impact entrepreneurship as well, where people are building, social entrepreneurship became something more tangible. It got out of the reins of CSR. When I was working in international human rights law, talking about social enterprise was, I don't think I was able to explain it to anyone 10 years ago, basically. Everyone thought it was charity work. But now, building sustainable businesses who have a positive impact of the world is very viable, and there are more and more funds, such as yourself, who are actually supporting them financially. I actually want to hear you talk about that, George and Faraz particularly.
So you raise a very important point about now starting up a company is becoming hyper-competitive. The knowledge, the tools needed to do that are available everywhere. So what differentiates you? I go back to that authenticity. The more powerfully that the reason, the purpose for you doing this resonates, the more likely you are going to be the one that attracts the important stakeholders that will want to align themselves with you. So I think this is a very, very important point. I think you'll find that in this period in which we are now, I think authenticity will become the competitive advantage. How authentic are you in wanting to solve that problem? How important is that problem? How much that problem really irritates you? And I think those are going to be the people who will attract the powerful stakeholders that they'll need to eventually emerge.
Actually, I can only second that just by a personal example, which is that I was sitting once with a very senior person in this bank, and we were doing a visit of a few fintechs, and we were listening to this guy sell his company and what they were doing, and the technology was good. It was good. They had a good platform. Then this person, this senior banker, was telling me, look, it doesn't matter what the technology is. I would invest in this company for this person. It was authentic. this person wasn't experienced in like, lending or whatever it was they were doing in the business. But the person obviously was like super energetic and excited and passionate about solving that problem. And the only reason they would invest in that company was that authenticity of wanting to solve that problem, which actually made it compelling.
Taking a leaf from what Houssam said earlier about altruism and what George has just mentioned, I think my experience comes from Pakistan, which is a very challenging environment. Things are getting better over there now. The two kinds of socially driven enterprises. One are purpose-driven, altruism-driven, and the other, the majority of them, are need-driven. Now, we have come across, you've got to weigh, the more educated the stakeholders are, the more efficient the ecosystem is, the purpose-driven and altruism-driven enterprises and social enterprises would emerge in a more robust manner. The developing economy, more focused on Pakistan, we are not there yet. At this point of time, they're churning out social enterprises that are solving challenges that the academia should be solving, that the government should be solving, that the existing major stakeholders, like private sector, should be focusing on. So these social enterprises are coming from the needs. And the roadmap for both of these social enterprises are slightly different. Because if you're purpose-driven and you've come back from Said Business School or Columbia or Harvard, and you understand the ethos and the structures and the jargons and the mechanisms of social enterprises, and then you set up and create something meaningful. The roadmap, the growth pattern, the impact of that social enterprise would be slightly, the trajectory of it, the share, would be different compared to the one that has been developed by an uneducated woman in the rural slums simply because she cannot have access to clean water. And interestingly, in our part of the world, the growth trajectory of the latter is phenomenal and are actually leading the example for the more structured and the more educated and altruism-driven social enterprises.
Just to get back to what you said about Pakistan, I know a little bit this country. You have a lot of investors from Abu Dhabi there. Pakistan is in the same situation than many countries in the Middle East. Today, the problem when you talk about social entrepreneur or even disruption is the access to money. Okay, a lot of people in Pakistan are very well educated. It's a wonderful country. We have a bad image often about it in the Western media, but it's a great country with a lot of potential. But there is no access to financing.
Great.
And today, just one point, we always talk about innovation, about new technology, entrepreneurs. But I believe today the most important point is how to have access to financing. I'm sure here in this place, a lot of you, maybe more than 50% of you have business idea. And I'm sure all of them are great. But your first problem is not how to do business plan, it's what is the idea, how to have an impact on the society. It's how to have access to financing. So to get back to your question, you asked about do we need to have experience to be an entrepreneur? The answer is, of course, not. The best entrepreneurs today are not even graduated. So you can see that, no, it's not an obligation. First of all. The second point is we are in a changing world. The world today is different than the world 10 years ago. Even me, I'm already late for this world. Because you need to understand technology today. You need to understand application. So it's the new generation that will create the future. Because you need to understand all of this. Someone who is 50-year-old is maybe too late today to understand the application, smartphones, etc. You can, you look younger than this.
I agree.
But the most important point, I believe, is not do you have an idea, is once again the financing. And when you are 25-year-old and you come to someone with a great idea, You say, okay, you're young, you don't have experience. Why should I give you money? Why should I trust you? And this is, I think, the main issue in the Middle East as well as in Europe, financing. You can talk about a lot of angel capitalists, VCs, a lot. You have maybe in London thousands, in France you have a lot in US. But let's make a ratio. How many projects they receive, how many projects they study, and how many projects they finance. I think the ratio is below 1%.
Okay, you just cracked open the Pandora's box. So, a quick show of hands, actually. How many people out there are actually entrepreneurs? Oh, wow, that's quite a... And how many people are VCs? So, talk to him. Where I'm going to go with this is that at the moment we're in the midst of a fundraise. Now look, I'm 50 years old actually. I was born in 1960s. Born in 1960s. So much. You guys look great. I love you. Pay you later. So at the moment we're in the middle of a fundraise, and of course, with the grey hairs and having been around the block a few times and a great track record, you'd kind of expect that the doors would be wide open. However, it's interesting and ironic, perhaps actually, that what VCs are looking for, in particular in the UK, is they're looking for millennial-type startups. That's where the money tends to go, and it tends to follow buzzwords. I'm pleased that there's lots of entrepreneurs in here, not too many VCs, because I'll probably annoy them by saying this, but they tend to follow buzzwords, AI, the laughter already starts. IoT, yeah. Any others?
VR.
Yeah, VR. So all these acronyms sort of come in, and it's the new thing. Now, what's interesting, I think, between the European investment community, and I can't say I've got the great experience of the Middle East Africa, but from my perspective is this, that we have an awful lot of what I call investors in tech. What I mean by that is the people who invest into technology companies without necessarily understanding what it is that the company's trying to achieve or what the opportunity looks like. Conversely, if you look at the Californian market, which is where this is predominantly grown up from, what we have over there is what I call tech investors. And the distinction is this, that a tech investor is someone who looks at the idea, and I was blessed to be sat down with the chap who, what was his name, Buzz, who basically was one of the founders of Twitter, and he was basically saying that if someone comes up to him with a good idea, he just basically says, here's the money. All he's looking for is the idea. Now, over here, what we're looking for, actually, is what does the team look like, what kind of energy is coming from them, and I think to pick up on your point, a big part of this, actually, as an entrepreneur, is how do you present yourself. If you've got a great idea, it's very difficult to get stakeholders on board if you haven't got the passion and the enthusiasm and energy, and you can't project that to other people. Are you feeling me, people? Right? So it's important to get that, and actually, I will touch on that. I'm going to ensure that during the masterclass today, I'll talk a little bit about how to actually get yourself into what I call state and how to maintain it and get your focus together so that when you do go into a meeting with the potential investor, you come across as someone that's really in the room and ready to go.
I'm conscious of our time limit, so I want to see if there are any questions first. Anyone who wants to ask us? Okay, George, do you want to make your point, or should I just jump into the question? Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Susanna's flown in from Singapore, I believe, today.
Yes,
Welcome,
so if
Tony.
I talk gibberish, it's just the jet lag. But interesting conversation about, corporate collaborations between corporates and startups. Faraz, they mentioned about, first of right refusal and so on. My view on these corporate ventures is they're a bit skeptical because, unless corporates start to be measured beyond, profit, something that has components from the ERR, I just don't see so much good for social impact coming out of that kind of ventures unless they directly serve the company's purpose, which for most companies is to generate profit, and that's it, and perhaps a bit of CSR, but not much beyond it. So I'd just like to hear from the panelists if there are any other examples that you'd like to share with the audience.
Certainly. The fact is that I agree with you. They need to be educated about the social impact. But there are two things that if you start working with a corporate on an enterprise idea, they have their risk it's very low compared to if they start somewhere outside. Now, because of that low risk and the risk mitigation, their inclination towards working with that idea, because that is working in their own sphere of supply or distribution. That's the first challenge, to actually bring them towards that entrepreneurial spirit. The second is making them understand the social impact and the improvement of the community. That is the challenging bit. But when you're setting out, if you're devising your legal structure in such a way, those corporates, the fact is it's a win-win for them in either case, because if they're making money, great, but they're actually developing their own supply and distribution communities. So for them to actually understand the value proposition is relatively easy. So this is personally the experience that we are having with the corporate side. But yes, I agree that for them to actually understand the social impact is slightly difficult because they're mostly profit-driven.
So here's an idea for you. We have in a majority of companies, I certainly hope they do, you have maternity leave, and now we have paternity leave, which is fantastic. So my suggestion here is that we introduce a thing called entrepreneurship leave, where you give people the opportunity to continue on their salary, but to actually pursue something that they're passionate about. And it may or may not benefit the company. I suggest that in majority of cases it probably will, because what you see in businesses is this idea of spinning out a small team of people to basically work on an idea, and then they get spun back in at a later date once they've added some value. Or they get spun out and go off and create their own venture, but the company retains a small shareholding in them. I think the difficulty is breaking this, the corporate oversight and bonds. You need a little bit of more flexibility in terms of letting people go and actually pursue their idea, as opposed to having the traditional kind of heavy oversight, and I don't think that that's the right way to go. So it's basically allowing this small child to go off and develop itself without necessarily having too much of the parental oversight, just at the point where it's basically trying to work out how to get up and start walking.
This brings to mind Google's 20% rule as well.
Exactly. Everybody spends 1 day a week doing something they want to do, which is could be entrepreneurial. I just want to pick on the point very briefly on the point you said that corporates are motivated by profit. Of course, they are. Most of them are, or by CSR. I actually find there's probably one more angle, quite practically, which is that it's kind of bottom up in the sense that they're also, in some sense, motivated by what their employees would want. And I think what I find increasingly is it's kind of the employees at large do feel the need to be engaged in something that's social. So I do think there's an angle that's just beyond the profit motive or CSR or what the press is going to say, in the sense that a lot of them feel the need. And I can just also give a very quick anecdote. As part of McKinsey, when we kind of recruit in university events, it's almost almost every single candidate will say that the thing they care about is making social impact. And it's not just about how we're going to sort of have this company save an extra million or whatever. So I do think this is a kind of bottom-up movement in some sense that I think corporates are seeing and facing. Yeah, exactly. So that might be another angle for them.
We have just a couple of more minutes for some comments from Houssam.
Just to answer about social impact, social entrepreneurship. I can talk on the investor side, because this is what we do at GDC Partners. I believe most of the investors today, no matter what we say, they don't really care about this. They are here to put money and to have a return. We can have examples. We can have articles in magazines, TV show, whatever. At the end of the day, the investor wants his money back. So it's very difficult to implement this notion of social entrepreneur in investors' mind. And I believe it's going to take time. I had a lot of experience of meetings with investors where at the end they are here to calculate ROI, IRR. And it's very difficult when we are talking about disruption to explain them, for example, the multiple of EBITDA. How can you calculate something like this for something that is not in the market yet? You cannot compare to another company. So at the end, it's very difficult for innovative companies to raise funds or to have social impact with investors. This is why we need alternative ways to raise funds for this kind of initiatives or company.
So just to touch on this point, very important. Here's an interesting test case. Deniz Ringelmann, the founder of Indiegogo, who founded the company at Stanford Business School in 2008, founded the company based on the fact that she was raised by a father who struggled his entire life with his family business for the simple reason he couldn't get funding. And it mattered for her so much that she created Indiegogo. Now, she said, she came up on stage, and the first thing she said was, let me tell you a secret. The real thing about Indiegogo, it's not about the money. It's about validating an idea. It's about establishing a conversation with your customers and potential customers, trying out an idea, getting feedback, and iterating. It's not the ideal platform for every type of business, but the point is, the interesting point is that in their Series B fundraise, KKR, the large venture capital fund, was one of their big investors. And she explained why KKR invested. Quite simply because they said, you are changing the game. You are increasing the probability of companies succeeding. And that makes us, as investors further down the line, more likely to deploy capital more evenly across the board instead of trying to find the big winner.
Okay, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but obviously there's so many more things to touch upon. We might as well do that over the coffee break, if I'm not mistaken. Thanks for listening to us, and please join me in giving a huge thanks to our brilliant panel.